This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible by Henteiko Dojin. We have had a lot of requests to take a look at a game called Cho Ren Sha 68K. It's a game we've wanted to cover too, but some technical hurdles are keeping us from doing it. And this is not that review, but one that does share an awful lot in common with Cho Ren Sha 68K, even at a glance. Graze Counter was developed by Bikkuri Software and released on July 28, 2017 by Henteiko Dojin. It's a pretty blatant love letter to Cho Ren Sha 68K in most every respect, and sports all kinds of additional content that builds significantly on Cho Ren Sha 68K's core concept. Let's take a closer look. Graze Counter takes a very simple approach to its gameplay. Players select from a smaller roster of characters that grows under specific conditions, then chooses their control type, special ability, and difficulty. On the whole, Graze Counter controls identically between the two different modes available. 8-way control moves the player's ship around the screen. Pressing and holding the shot button fires a rapid shot that slows the player's ship speed down in the include mode. Another mode, Split, assigns a dedicated button to slow the player's speed, allowing for rapid fire with faster movement. In the case of the two default ships, players have access to two special abilities. Grazing up against bullets will build the blue counter gauge, also indicated by a percentile reading beside the player's ship. When filled, players then have access to the counter beam. This beam deals quite a bit of damage and creates a bullet-canceling barrier around the player's craft. If a full 100% charge is not achieved though, the barrier will not engage. While it doesn't need to be charged all the way to 100% to be used, the counter beam will last longer the higher the percentage is. It will need to have a considerable charge to activate though. As players defeat enemies and nullify bullets with the counter beam, gold stars will appear and will be sucked into the craft when not firing. This, in turn, fills a yellow bar, which allows players to use the break technique when full. This attack is incredibly powerful and is quite useful in taking out larger enemies. It should be noted that some unlockable ships do not have some of these additional features available, so fairly simple, but there is quite a bit of risk-reward to Graze Counter's core gameplay. Every now and again, a specific ship type will appear that releases a spinning power-up cluster when defeated, which grants players one of several enhancements: a full gauge pickup which fills both the break and counter gauges instantly, a shield pickup that allows players to get hit just once without dying, and a rate enhancement that jacks the hit counter to 1000 instantly for more score. More on that in a bit. Sometimes extends can also be picked up in this manner. Helpful. Knowing which of these to pick up in any given situation is critical to making efficient progress in Graze Counter with regards to life, power, and score management. If any one item is picked up though, a bullet clear will happen, which is really handy in crowded situations. 3 different abilities can be chosen at the beginning of the game too. Auto Shield allows for a regenerating shield to be obtained over time, allowing for concentration on scoring a little more easily. Overgraze will cancel bullets if grazed for a longer period of time and enhances the amount of energy added to the Graze Counter gauge. Finally, Guard Extend allows for a barrier to be deployed even with less than 100% charge on the counter gauge. All 3 have benefits that will work for players of different play style. The game flow is otherwise pretty much like other vertical shooters out there. Over the course of 5 stages, players dodge bullets, take out a mini-boss or 3, and fight the end-stage boss to progress to the next stage. Different difficulties have different nuance to them though. Novice has no rank increase, making for a really easy 1cc. Meanwhile, Arcade will adjust the rank according to the player's survival time, and Expert ratchets up the bullet count in addition to rank increase. There's even a Pacifist mode that has players given access only to grazing mechanics and the counter beam attack. No shots or break attacks allowed. Unlocking extra characters requires at least 4 playthroughs too, so there's definitely a little bit of replay here. Omake, or extra stages, like a super hard special stage and infinite mode, add more gameplay to the package as well. A boss rush can also be unlocked. There's even a mission mode where players take on tutorial-style challenges through a number of missions, most of which are timed. Players can choose from various parameters like which character they'd like, as well as control layout. All in all, there's a fair amount of content here, but nothing substantial. Players will want to complete the game on all difficulties with all of the characters, which will increase the amount of time that will be spent in the game. But a lack of online leaderboards definitely hurts the longevity of Graze Counter. If online leaderboards were to be implemented, they would almost certainly give a more competitive edge to the game on the whole, especially since there's a decent scoring system at play here as well. Graze Counter has a pretty solid risk-reward system at its core that can make for a huge amount of pointage in very little time. Players can build up a multiplier which modifies the score in direct correlation to the counter's value. The multiplier counter can be brought all the way up to 1000, making for a huge bonus for each enemy killed, bosses included. The multiplier counter is raised entirely by grazing and can be maintained briefly with a green gauge that will deplete when grazing does not occur. When this gauge empties, the hit counter will fall. Effective grazing can make for a huge multiplier very quickly. Even the simple act of grazing can add a ton of pointage to the player's score as well. However, if a player opts to take the multiplier boost rather than shields or gauge fillers from item ships, they can instantly go to 1000 on the multiplier, making for very early, easy score boosts that can lead to a fast, early extend. Especially paired with the auto shield function, players can simply blast their multiplier to max from the start, rather than wasting their time with grazing. Gold stars obtained when enemies are hit with the counter beam also add a fair amount of pointage to the mix, but red stars are even better. Obtained when using the break mechanic, red stars will appear when enemies are hit by this super powerful attack. All shots nullified by the break will change over to red stars as well. Especially in the case of bosses, a large amount of these stars can be obtained in a short amount of time. At stage end, a number of stats will contribute to a large bonus. The number of grazed bullets is multiplied by 100 points, with the total number of gold stars being worth an extra 250 points each, and red stars weighing in at a much more satisfying 500 points apiece. A timer bonus and lives remaining all contribute to what can amount to a huge chunk of extra pointage. Local rankings for Graze Counter exist, with Novice, Arcade, and Expert rankings displaying the highest achieved score for both regular and pacifist modes. However, with no online leaderboards, players will have to rely on external forums and sites if they want to show off their scores. And again, the lack of online leaderboards can really hurt the longevity of Graze Counter on the whole. Hopefully in the future, they'll be added in. Another area in which Graze Counter resembles Cho Ren Sha 68K is its presentation. It's not just a passing resemblance either. Not only are the enemy ships and general stage design very similar, even the player ships are similarly designed. That's not to say that there's nothing unique about Graze Counter's aesthetic though. Everything from the sprites to the UI is well designed in-game, and the characters that you'll encounter are equally well drawn and colored. However, the portraits on the side of the screen left a bit to be desired from us though, but that's purely subjective. Special attacks and boss design are also of particular note in Graze Counter, with huge satisfying bosses, and really cool special attack effects from both the enemy and player sides. There's never really a dull visual moment here. Sound-wise, players are definitely going to want to tweak the SFX and BGM volumes in the meta options before the game actually starts to find a level that works best for them. By default, the BGM is way too quiet, and the SFX are way too loud. When everything is balanced though, everything works extremely well, with perfect tones for everything on screen, as well as unique indicators for various gauges filling and so forth. The OST is also excellent. The general UI in Graze Counter is not only well designed but easy to follow as well, though we noticed that the controller buttons for include and split control options differed from the actual default button mapping on screen. Which is actually pretty good, because what's shown in-game wouldn't actually work especially well compared to what's there by default. The button order can be changed in the pre-game meta options though. Both gamepad and keyboards are supported. Rounding out Graze Counter's presentation is a set of Steam trading cards that can be collected through continued play. There are, however, no achievements here, which might limit the playtime spent with Graze Counter. So, how does Graze Counter stack up? Let's take a look. Graze Counter's control is spot on whether playing with the include or split control modes. Control customization is also a handy feature in the meta options. Graze Counter makes for a very easy 1cc on Novice, but gets sufficiently more challenging with increased difficulties. Unlocking new characters and their ships extends the playtime of Graze Counter a bit, but with no online leaderboards and a lack of achievements, its length may suffer. Graze Counter has solid visuals all around, especially when it comes to the player portraits, bosses, and special attacks. Some elements like the character art on the side of the game screen though have a bit of a wonky design to them. Overall, the sound in Graze Counter is pretty great, but will require some fine-tuning on the player's part from its default levels. SFX is good, BGM is great. Graze Counter builds on the general idea of Cho Ren Sha 68K in good ways, making for a game that definitely separates itself from its source material. At the same time though, it also feels very similar. At just $10 US, Graze Counter is definitely worth more than a passing glance. There's absolutely a good amount of game here for its asking price. On the whole, we really dug Graze Counter. Its great sense of style and sharp gameplay is one that will keep us coming back to unlock all of the 8 characters and extra modes. Hopefully, an online leaderboard can be patched into the game to help bolster the replay of this pretty sweet game. Graze Counter gets a 4 out of 5. You can get a copy of Graze Counter on Steam today for about $10 US. We know a lot of you want us to take a look at Cho Ren Sha 68K as well, but technical hurdles still have us weighing capture options. But we may have found a solution. Until then, here are some other games that were particularly hard for us to capture.